destroy me and you can't let them do that to you. So pull yourself together. So we protested in the death chamber. We put up the Black Power sign. And at the end, we said, we screamed in unison, the few of us that were there for him. The state of California just killed an innocent man, and there are no windows in there. It was all concrete. So the words just reverberated. It was more powerful than we could have imagined. But as I was leaving, I wanted, of course, to just collapse and cry. But Stan, as you say, Reverend Jackson, how they can talk to you from the grave. He was dead at that point, but I heard his voice say to me, "You represent me. You don't collapse, you stand up." And I had probably the best posture I've ever had in my life. The way I walked out of there saying, okay, in my head, I was like, I represent Stan. Cry when you get home, not now. So Stan was executed, and illegally, given that it was cruel, it was ruled to be cruel and unusual punishment, the way that, of course, any kind of execution is cruel and unusual, but even within the law's definition of what happened to him, the torture and the botching of the execution made it even more cruel and unusual. So I saw the state of California kill Stanley Tookie Williams. I then fast forward almost 15 years later, and I see George Floyd killed by a government, somebody representing the government. I see him executed, lynched, executed, and it triggered my death chamber experience. And it was, and so I only could watch it once. I could not. Anytime I had to put it on mute, I had to walk away. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it again. I learned a tremendous amount from Stan. But one of the big lessons is everybody assumed that I helped him so much with his redemption. But what I can honestly say is he helped to me with my own redemption every bit as much as I contributed. Whatever I contributed to him was certainly no more, or probably not even as close as what he contributed to me, which, and part of that speaks to what my thoughts are for what we can do with the situation we're in. So where I am now in watching what has transpired, I agree with the Reverend. We do need to deal, of course, with with whatever laws and that we can come up with to deal with the police brutality. But we need to deal with more than that. We need to, like he called, I wrote down where he said banking apartheid. So what I was thinking, because there's been a discussion about the social contract, and that the social contract has been broken. Well, if we're honest about this, how did we get here? Well, we were never part of the social contract. So, what's the social contract? Well, it's sort of the values that a populace or a citizenry has that says, okay, if you will give me these things, we'll give you consent to govern us. And but the problem was our concerns weren't part of it. And so we were sort of we were reacting to the way we were being treated by that social contract, and the dominant culture was projecting. We were a part of it, but we were a part of it based on what they wanted, how they wanted us dealt with, how the majority or ruling class wanted us dealt with. But we need a new social contract, but we need to be a player this time. And to fall back on the parlance of the gangster class, who I know well now from my research, 27 years of research, we need to be players. And my position is, we're no more asking, no more begging to be players. No, we are players. Let us claim our status at this point. Just no more equivocating. And let's work on a new social contract. And this time, having learned our lesson, that puppy needs to be in writing, all of it, not the part that's, well, the Constitution. And what the Reverend said is absolutely right. I wrote that down, that rules determine the winner. So I agree with everything that everybody has said thus far. I'm just saying right now, while we have this energy,
yes,
we need to come up with some tangible things for folks to do. I saw this wonderful documentary about James Baldwin that was called I'm Not Your Negro. And one of the quotes, and I wrote it down because I was like completely blown away. He's at Cambridge University talking about race, and he says, there is scarcely any hope for the American dream because the people who are denied participation in it by their very presence will wreck it. So in other words, if you don't let us, we're here to make everything better. Back to what Van said, it will make America better, not worse, better. And not even just better, way better, much better.
I wanted to bring up Tukey because most people don't even know they know the Crips and the Bloods, but they don't know his history. And most importantly, again, they don't know how he became a peacemaker. So I have one quick question for you, then I'm going to go to Derek. I'd really love to know, because you were there, I had my experience of it. He experienced me as a man. He didn't experience me as a white man. He had, same thing as you, initial concerns, but then he felt who I was, consistent communication. I interviewed him, for a direct conversation with the governor that was private since the governor wouldn't come meet him. And he wouldn't fall on his knees and beg. He said, Tony, I've done a lot of things. I've done worse things than this, but I didn't do this. And he said, I'm not going to give up my integrity. And he had this transformation inside himself from a man of violence to a man of peace. It's as large a transformation as a human can probably experience. And he told me that the experience of that was an internal one. He was blaming everybody on the outside. He said he read these great books, religious books, philosophy, and it began to change his way of looking at himself, where he took responsibility for himself in a whole new way. And then from a place of peace in himself, he could bring peace to others. But he couldn't do it when he was enraged, he said. And so very much like Martin Luther King's approach, right, in terms of peace being the approach. So tell me, can you tell us two things? One, how did Stan go from the man he was to the man he became, the man you judged, and by the time you met him, he was a different man who literally touched the world? And secondly, what would Stan want to happen now in the midst of all this?
Okay, so